Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good middle of the night, whether you're at happy hour, getting home from work or on your way there, or maybe you're just sitting poolside on the weekend. We're really happy you guys are tuning into the Pylon Dons Fantasy Football Podcast, where we help you dominate your leagues, both dynasty and redraft. And today we're going to be talking about guys that we really can't leave the draft without. And I'm really excited, as always, to be joined by my amazing co-host, Ben Weiner. Ben, how are you doing today?
Dude, I'm feeling like Peter Parker. Just amazing, man. I'm so excited for this episode. Guys we love and later on guys we hate are two of my favorite episodes of the entire season, because one thing that AJ and I really want to provide to the listeners is accountability. We understand that there's a lot of analysts who will go out there and say their piece on a player and you'll never hear from them again. We want you to specifically be influenced by these three players we take, or, you know what, don't take them, not our problem, but we want the receipts to be associated with these guys. So when you take a player that we're going to discuss today, you could say, hey, AJ the Pylon Don was ready to put his reputation on the line for that guy, and we're really excited to bring the noise here.
I couldn't have said it better myself. That's really what it comes down to, is bringing the noise and planting our flag. And not only do we do this, but we do something called 100 Takes, which will happen right before the NFL season, where the receipts get even larger, because we want you guys to understand, whether we're right or wrong, our thought process throughout the offseason about how we made certain analyses and decisions on certain players. And basically today, we're going to be discussing guys that we love in fantasy football this year. Each of us has chosen 3 players. We're going to give you a quick little breakdown. We're not really going to push back and forth too much if there's any disagreements on this show, as well as guys we hate. It's kind of just a time for both Ben and I to speak our piece on some players that we're either avoiding or drafting at all costs. So I'm really pumped to get into it. Ben, do you have any more words for the listeners before we get started?
Yeah, this is really important. And I can't stress this enough. You can find us on social media at the Pylon Dons on Instagram, at Pylon Dons on Twitter, and at Pylon Dons Fantasy Football YouTube, and at Pylon Dons Fantasy Football on YouTube. And as always, shout out to our sponsor, Verse Gaming. Sorry, I paused for dramatic effect. I just needed to
build a noise for it. You needed to build a noise.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it.
AJ, so we each have 3 players. Today you have 2 running backs and a wide receiver. I have 2 running backs and a tight end. Where do you want to start today, kid?
Well, I mean, if you're calling him a running back, then I'm fair to take that into account, because that's...
Sorry. A quarterback, sorry. Sorry. I know I was just talking about how locked in I am. That actually starts now.
There we go.
Now we're locked in.
Now we're locked in. All right. I can get started if you don't mind.
Please do.
All right. I'm gonna just kick it off right out the gate with probably my number 1 flag plant and the highest ADP of the 3 guys I've selected for this. And it's Javonte Williams. If we're going off of Fantasy Pros ADP and PPR, I have to double check. I currently believe that he is the running back 14 in their rankings at the moment. Let me just pull that up. He's actually running back 13, so right outside of the top 12. But the further and further we've gotten through this offseason, the more confident I've become in this take. You've probably heard this tons of times if you scroll through Twitter, but on a per-touch basis, Javonte Williams was statistically the most elusive back in the NFL, and he ranked in the top 10 in rushes of 10 or more yards after contact, and total missed tackles, despite not ranking inside the top 15 on carries. So this is a player who is young, came in as a rookie, alongside an established veteran, and showed a lot of efficiency and a lot of big play potential, which from a rookie is super valuable. We got a sneak peek at what Javonte was truly capable of last year, when in weeks 12 to 14, he averaged 20.4 PPR points per game in those games where Melvin Gordon was out with an injury. So it feels like things are kind of shaping up to when Jonathan Taylor was chilling there in the second round last year a little bit. And I'm not saying that Melvin Gordon is something to be cast aside. I'll get into him just a little bit later. But it feels like that 20.4 points per game was, again, just a sneak peek of what this guy is truly capable of. Melvin Gordon even came out and said they want Vontae to be the guy when he spoke to the media at training camp. So really what it was last year was a true 50-50 split in every sense of the term. I mean, you had games where Javonte had 45% snaps, 55% snaps, but really when both of them were healthy, it was a true 1-2 punch, and the touchdowns were really just up for grabs. But the problem with that was there was just not many touchdowns to go around because of how putrid the quarterback play was. The addition of Russell Wilson is going to completely change that. It's going to provide Javonte Williams more opportunities to catch the ball. And this is a guy that received 53 targets last year. And things are shaping up for that target volume to stay because Albert O doesn't look great. They don't know who's their tight end one. Tim Patrick, unfortunately, suffering that injury. And now KJ Hamler's forced to step in as wide receiver 3. So there's more targets up for grabs than people kind of realize, especially because historically Russ doesn't really target over the middle of the field as much. So the slot receiver role and the tight end role may not receive the same type of volume that some of the outside receivers or the running back could receive. So the thing about Javonte is he only averaged 12 points a game last year, but that was on very limited touches, and that helped him finish the RB17 overall. So if you're taking him at the RB13, you're not necessarily taking him at his floor, but you're taking him pretty close to it. And when he took over this backfield, the sky was the limit. So if he's able to get to a 60% snap share, which is really not that crazy. I mean, he was hovering around 50. So jumping that extra 10% and sort of making it a 60-40 split would just make his numbers jump off the page and immediately put him in low-end RB1 territory with tons of room for upside with all the new scoring opportunities he'll see. So really what it comes down to is I'm willing to take Javonte Williams as early as the 201. I have him as my RB8 right now. And I know that doesn't seem that far off from his RB13 ADP, but it's sort of a vote of confidence that I think he's in that tier with the Joe Mixons and the Dalvin Cooks in terms of potential league-winning upside. So all of that put together, I really think people just cannot sleep on Javonte Williams this season. If he's able to take some of the red zone work away from Melvin Gordon as well and continue to eat into that workload, then I really do think the sky's the limit. And he could see, honestly, a lion's share of touches as we go down the stretch in the season, considering Melvin Gordon's 29 as well. So I'm going to be drafting Javonte Williams everywhere that I can get him. I really strongly urge you guys to do the same because this feels like one of those players. He's in that age bracket where the breakout makes sense. Second-year running back, highly efficient season, earning more snaps, improvements to the offense. It's kind of all coming together. And the looming threat of Melvin Gordon is real, but you got to remember he is 29 years old. He does have a lot of wear and tear. And while I'm not one to project injuries, Javonte has already ate into his workload throughout training camp regardless. So I feel like we're drafting him pretty close to his floor. And I think the upside is a top 3 running back.
And that is our first player. AJ is all in on Javonte Williams this year. Not going to really challenge him on it. This is his platform for his guys, his flag plants. I will say Javonte is someone who I used to be previously very outspoken against. And I'm not there with AJ. He's not going to be on my list of guys I love, but I've certainly moved him up my ranks. A lot of what AJ is pointing to, there are things looking up for Javonte Williams in terms of the offense improving, in terms of him potentially leading that timeshare with Melvin Gordon. So if that's AJ's take, that's AJ's take, and I'm here supporting my boy. I'm going to take it over to a guy that I had no shares of last year, and I liked it that way, and I would do it all over again last year. Last year I was out on Kyle Pitts, and while in my dynasty leagues, that definitely hurts now. From a redraft perspective, I'm not kicking myself for passing up on last year's tight end 6 and round 3-4 ADP he had. This year, Kyle Pitts is one of the 3 guys I love, and honestly, he could be the player I love most. Kyle Pitts is a league winner. Book it. For proof, I think so. He's my highest owned player on Underdog, and I've ponied up for 3 more shares in Dynasty this year. Now that I've established how much I like Kyle Pitts, let me explain to you why you need to like Kyle Pitts as much. Last year, he finished as the tight end 6 in PPR, tight end 9 if you still play in standard leagues with my grandma. And he did this on 110 targets for 68 receptions, totaling 1,000 yards and 1 measly touchdown. Here's a list of every rookie since 1998 to gain 1,000 receiving yards. Jalen Waddle, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, A.J. Brown, Michael Thomas, Amari Cooper, Kelvin Benjamin, Odell Beckham Jr., Mike Evans, Keenan Allen, A.J. Green, Marquise Colston, Michael Clayton, Anquan Bolden, and Randy Moss. And for what it's worth, there's another 10 players on that list since 1952. Full transparency, I don't know who Bill Groman is. He was on the Houston Oilers, but if you look at his stats, he was a dog. Everyone on this list was a dog except for Kelvin Benjamin's fat ass, excuse my language. That's it. These are some of the best receivers who have ever stepped on a football field, or dudes that we are projecting to will. And Kyle Pitts is in that company with him and only Mike Ditka, who was a Hall of Famer. Kyle Pitts was the highest tight end ever drafted. As a rookie last year, if you compared Kyle Pitts' rookie year to wide receivers, a couple wide receivers with comparable rookie seasons in terms of points per game, he would have been the wide receiver 35 last year. That was in the range of guys like DK Metcalf, DJ Moore, Chris Godwin, Deontay Johnson, all guys who have been a wide receiver one at one point in their career. And lastly, keep Marcus Mariota's name out of your mouth. Keep it out. He got Rashard Higgins to 950 yards and 9 touchdowns. We saw DeAndre Hopkins, and this is like a go-to example, but it's relevant, being an elite talent with poor quarterback play and still producing wide receiver 1 overall numbers for years. If a guy is good enough, a guy is good enough. There's no other way to explain it. I'm not saying Mariota's a plus to a receiving weapon the way that Patrick Mahomes or a Josh Allen is, but for the tight end with the highest draft capital ever at the tight end rookie position, while joining an exclusive club of 2 tight ends who had 1,000 yards as a rookie and produced 1,000 yards on less targets, joining the likes of Jamar Chase and Jalen Waddle, Mariota just doesn't scare me. I think we could really be watching a legend be born, and I'm not going to allow that on my league mates roster. I think this could be the equivalent of having a Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase in your tight end spot in round 3. And I'm willing to put my name and takes on the line for that. I'm all in on this guy.
I'm taking Kyle Pitts as early as the 210 right now. He's currently my 22nd overall ranked player. I'm fully on board with you. I have no complaints about anything. Marcus Mariota had Delanie Walker get 3 top 5 tight end seasons out of him. And Delanie Walker's good, but by God, is he no Kyle Pitts, man? Not even close. And I just think you're totally hitting the nail on the head. Purely from a talent perspective, this is a can't miss guy. If you watch him for 10 minutes, you'll recognize that right away. And hopefully I'll be rostering a good amount of Kyle Pitts this year as well.
Yeah, this is a guy who could be the best offensive player in the NFL at some point in his career. If not now, then when? Maybe it takes a year or two, maybe it doesn't. I'd also like to just acknowledge that this is proof I can change my opinions and not always have take lock, because I correctly was very, very out on Kyle Pitts last year. And this year, everything is coming together. I've seen enough. I'm all in.
There we go. All right, I'm going to keep it in the running back department for this one. And I'm going to talk about a guy that I raved about on the AFC East episode and somebody who I've been drafting a ton of since early July in best ball. It's Ramondre Stevenson. People tend to forget that Ramondre Stevenson's start in New England was ugly. He was a day 3 pick. He failed a conditioning test at OTAs the summer of his rookie year. He fumbled in his first NFL game. He was inactive for weeks 2 to 4 after that. And then he only surpassed 11 touches just 5 times in his rookie season. So with all this being said, it's been an uphill battle for Ramondre Stevenson, and an uphill battle in Bill Belichick's backfield is ridiculously hard to win. For a day 3 pick to start off like that and then get 19 touches in 3 of his last 8 games is wild. But Stevenson really made the most of it by eclipsing 100 yards in 2 of those 3 games. So Bill clearly liked what he saw in limited time, and when the role expanded, Ramondre was what kept that efficiency going. The only game he didn't have 100 yards was that fluky Week 13 game against Buffalo, where Mac Jones threw for 3 pass attempts, and they pounded the rock like 45 times, and the Bills were just stacking the box all game. So otherwise, other than that kind of fluky, wild game, Ramondre, when he's received a large workload, has been wildly efficient. He ended the year with 660 yards and 5 touchdowns on the ground. And this was despite not playing in 5 of the 17 games last year. And again, only surpassing 11 touches in 5 of those games. So he also was pretty decent in the receiving game, something that was a big red flag for him as a prospect. He caught 14 of 18 targets, averaging 8.8 yards a catch. And the cool thing is, when I talked about Ramondre failing that conditioning test, he came in at 245 pounds. He is now 20 pounds lighter, and Bill Belichick is setting camp that he's going to take on, quote, the James White role, which, I mean, anybody who's ever owned James White during his fantasy success, your ears should be perking up at that, because the receiving work is really what is helping Ramondre meet and now start to exceed Damian Harris's ADP. Damian Harris will likely still be involved, but if we're seeing Ramondre get more involved in the passing game, especially with the retirement of James White, then we could see that 5% target share he got jump up to 10, 11%. And now you're opening a whole new upside to him, because in the last 8 weeks of the season, Ramondre was the RB28 in points per game, pretty much in a time split with Damian Harris down the middle, maybe even favoring Harris a little bit. And that was with very few targets and with a running back commanding about 55% of the snaps. So being able to basically hit his floor of RB28 this year, which is where he's being drafted, while playing alongside Harris, was a huge green flag for me. Sorry. Last thing I'll say real quick, because I don't want to take up too much time. If you look through the history of Patriots running backs, Lawrence Maroney, Stephen Ridley, Shane Vereen, James White, Sony Michel, and the aforementioned Damian Harris, every single one from their rookie year to their sophomore season, regardless of how few or many carries they had as a rookie, saw an increase the next year. That's the 5 last drafted starting running backs for Bill Belichick. And, I mean, for Damian Harris, the jump was huge. He got 4 carries as a rookie and then 137 as a sophomore. Even Sony Michel, who got 200 as a rookie, saw 250 as a sophomore. So once you've earned Bill Belichick's trust, you usually have a pretty firm role in this backfield. And for someone who graded as the 3rd highest running back on Pro Football Focus among all running backs last year, if he sees that increased workload and an increased target share, I think we could have a locked and loaded, set it and forget it RB2 that we're drafting in the 8th, 9th round right now.
Yeah.
With some upside as well. I mean, that's really all there is right there.
Ramondre is certainly a guy that I was slow to come around to, but I certainly have been influenced by a lot of your statistics and a lot of your historical comps on this. And initially just like loving my Patriots. Like, it's so funny how you just love Patriots players. And
I do, man. I was obsessed with Jacoby last year. I still like Mac Jones, even though that offense hasn't looked amazing in the preseason. I don't know. I mean, I just want a piece of whatever Bill Belichick is cooking up every year, because you never know, right?
Yeah, it's honestly just like respect, which I appreciate. It's kind of like how being a Red Sox fan, how it used to be like, oh, that's Derek Jeter. Like with the Yankees, you're just like, oh, that's Bill Belichick. I know that he's going to get it done and get it done right. You mind if I take it away with the number 1 quarterback I think you have to draft this year?
Yeah, please.
So to everyone listening, the sooner you realize that it does not matter if Trey Lance is a good NFL quarterback for him to be a good fantasy football quarterback, the sooner you will start winning fantasy football championships. It doesn't matter if Trey Lance is good at football. It matters that Trey Lance is good at fantasy football. He is, and he will be. Look at what Jalen Hurts did last year, a guy many wondered if he could be replaced in the draft in 2022 or 2023. Jalen Hurts had a completion percentage of 61%, which was 35th in the NFL among quarterbacks who had started multiple games. This is below the likes of Taylor Heineke and Carson Wentz. Hurts posted a 16-9 touchdown to interception ratio, which isn't great for fantasy football either. But now we look at the Konami key. 784 rushing yards on 10 attempts, and poof, just like that, all is forgiven. Jalen Hurts was the quarterback 1 through 11 weeks and finishes the quarterback 9 overall. He performed this with a subpar supporting cast, with stud rookie Devonta Smith being forced into a feature role and losing Zach Ertz via trade midseason. Now that we've made this comparison, let's take it to Lance. Lance was the 3rd overall pick last year and spent the year redshirting, a la Patrick Mahomes. When Lance was on the field last year, he flashed in a special way from a fantasy perspective, giving us double digits in every game he played and put up 20 points against Seattle in 1 half. He also plays behind one of the best offensive lines in football, and his weapons include All-Pro Deebo Samuel, former All-Pro George Kittle, recent first-rounder Brandon Ayuk, and a stable of running backs who make Sandoz reindeer feel inadequate, and Elijah Mitchell, Trey Sermon, Tyrion Davis-Price, Jeff Wilson, Jax Mason. This team is deep, and there is weapons across the board. I'm 43% sure I can lead this team to 6 wins and finish as a top 24 quarterback myself. I understand that Lance may not be the MVP this year, but he's set up for success in all avenues of football. The the opposite of Justin Fields. Justin Fields has nothing working for him this year. Trey Lance has everything working for him this year. And imagine, what if Trey Lance is good? What if he happens to be living up to this 3rd overall draft capital, and fantasy aside? What if the number 3 overall pick, who didn't throw any interceptions at North Dakota State, shows up? For me, Trey Lance is a floor of quarterback 6 and a ceiling of quarterback 1. There's too many things working in his favor for him to fail. And that's my take.
Yeah, Trey Lance's ADP is really
rising.
Good.
It's definitely rising.
It's definitely rising, but I'm not opposed to buying in. I definitely own a few shares of Trey Lance in best ball. I am worried that he may be a bit volatile just if he does have good and bad games. But I think people are overstating how volatile his arm may be and how much that's going to impact his fantasy output if this dude has wheels. Like, we know Konami QBs are the cheat. Like, it was Lamar in 2019. It was Kyler in 2020. It was Hurts last year. And Lance is going basically in the same spot as those guys and has a better offense than any of those 3 did. So I'm totally with you on the Trey Lance thing. You've turned me for sure on that one.
I appreciate that. It's something I've been on for a really, really long time. I was often coming into the draft, not from a fantasy perspective, but I just honestly, last year's quarterback class was so loaded, and he was just a guy I liked less than some of the other guys. I think I had him. I got to double check my rankings. I don't want to be incorrect. However, though, you mentioned the arm talent, and look, he has ways to go as a passer, but he has all the arm talent in the world. That's not up for debate. He can flick it 60 yards. He can throw it on the run. All of the talent is there. Now it's just harnessing it. The question is, are you getting a Josh Allen or a Patrick Mahomes before they're ready, or are you getting them ready-made? That's the question at hand. So, the worst-case scenario is that we're a year early, but I think Trey Lance is about to arrive, at least on the fantasy football scene.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm going to take it over to my last player. This one will be a little bit more brief than the running backs. It's Amon-Ra St. Brown, and this is actually somebody who I wasn't as into to start the year. The Jameson Williams pick had me a little bit worried just about what Amon-Ra St. Brown's role is if this offense takes on a new identity. But I took a little bit of a deeper dive into the type of player he is. So obviously, Amon-Ra St. Brown had a crazy run to end last year. 11 targets a game over weeks 13 to 18. He was the PPR wide receiver 3 overall, and he had a 33% target share. That's not happening again. Let's set the tone there. That is more likely than not going to happen again. But I think he has the ability to do that on a weekly basis. And I think he's a much safer option than people think this year. I mean, the offense is going to look better, especially with a fully healthy Swift and Hawkinson, and then the addition of DJ Chark. Jameson Williams, I believe they're going to bring in quite slowly, guaranteed, not playing week 1. The timeline says late October. But Amon-Ra's targets were entirely earned. He is a legitimate slot wide receiver, A-tier talent. And I'm not saying he is among the best receivers in the NFL, but when it comes to slot receivers, there's very few that have mastered that specialty role like Amon-Ra St. Brown does. He just reminds me of a better, higher upside, higher floor version of Hunter Renfrow, going 10 picks before Hunter Renfrow. So just to emphasize how important this slot role is, Goff, statistically throughout his career, throws to the slot receiver really often. He helped Cooper Kupp have a wide receiver 4 season in Cooper Kupp's 2019 season. In 2021, Amon-Ra St. Brown was taking first-team snaps in the slot. This is what he does. It's all he did at USC, and it's really all he's done for Detroit. Goff targets the slot a little over 50% of the time. To put it in perspective, the league average is in the mid-40%. So Goff targeting the slot in above average rate. Amon-Ra St. Brown showing signs of being able to do stuff after the catch, even when the defense is focusing on him. It's not like it was all dink and dunk. Amon-Ra was breaking off for some really big plays last year. And I think Chark stretching the field and a healthy Hawkinson, while we may not see those 11 targets a game, if that's 7.5 targets a game, he's still extremely valuable as a mid to high end wide receiver too. And I think that's super reasonable. He's currently being drafted as the wide receiver 30 on Underdog, but I'm projecting this Detroit Lions offense to take a significant step forward. And I mean, he played 77% of his snaps in the slot last year. And if he can continue to do that and demand a solid target share, I think a top 12 season is totally in the cards for Amon-Ra, and he's somebody you can get in the 7th round. So I've been taking a ton of Amon-Ra. I think he's going to be a set it and forget it wide receiver 2 every single week with wide receiver 1 upside.
That's spicy.
Yeah,
I love a lot of the points, and and we like not the time nor the place. You know that I'm not all the way there with you, but I certainly agree that he's a value at ADP. But that's why he's your flag plan and not mine. So if you're tailing Amon-Ra, know that AJ is endorsing it, and I don't hate it. This last one is tough for me.
No, it's not.
It's tough for me. No,
it's not that tough, man. Come on.
No. It hurt. It hurt. This is the right decision. This is the right guy to talk about. And thank you for helping me realize that, because you weren't. This isn't the guy that you prefer per se, but I was telling you, like, look, like, I just don't know how I'm not gonna talk about this guy. I don't know how I'm gonna put out guys I love and not talk about this guy. And this is tough for me, but guys I love is the overlap between good, thorough process and on top of that, trusting your gut. As much as I love Jerry Jeudy, who was in this spot last year, and up until about noon today was in this spot this year, this has been set for weeks because nothing has changed for Jerry Jeudy, in my opinion, except he got Russell Wilson and is playing with an elite quarterback now. And I still believe he has top 6 upside. I still believe he has wide receiver 1 upside. I still think he's a steal at ADP. I'm still willing to draft him above ADP. But if I didn't talk about A.J. Dillon, I would be doing all of you a disservice.
Yeah, you would. That's really what it came down to. If you're 98% confident in Jeudy, then you're 99% confident in A.J. Dillon. Because
that's probably how I'd put it at both. Because I think the fact that Courtland Sutton goes above Jerry Jeudy is one of the most messed up things on the entire planet. It spans beyond the fantasy football circle. I think every time I see someone post that they have Courtland Sutton over Jerry Jeudy, I lose my mind. But it has to be A.J. Dillon because it is so obvious. This is staring us in the face. A.J. Dillon was an early declare out of my local Boston College. Full transparency. I don't rep BC like that, but they are my local team. Shout out 508. Dillon was a local star since I was in high school. He was one of the most productive backs in the nation for his 3 years at Boston College. Then he gets a second-round draft capital, which, as we know, to be an elite running back, second-round draft capital, it surpasses the threshold. It's where guys like Javonte Williams, Jonathan Taylor, Breece Hall, DeAndre Swift,
J.K. Dobbins, Cam Akers, you name it.
He was drafted alongside those guys, first off, but we've never respected Dillon as much. So he's a second-round pick, and he started off his first year as a guy who mostly spelled Aaron Jones. Before last year, Dillon had a mini breakout of his own where he finishes the running back 23 in PPR formats, rushing for 800 yards and 5 touchdowns. What really shocked people, and the reason A.J. Dillon wasn't in that same conversation as guys like Jonathan Taylor, Javonte Williams, DeAndre Swift, whatever, was because we swore that A.J. Dillon could not catch the football. He had 21 career college receptions. However, last year we saw A.J. Dillon get 34 receptions, which is more than the likes of guys like Nick Chubb and Elijah Mitchell. While neither one of these guys are known for their pass-catching prowess, and we're not coordinating A.J. Dillon as the next Austin Eckler or anything, this is really, really important because Nick Chubb and Elijah Mitchell are 2 running backs who are significantly better real-life NFL running backs than their ADPs. Just is. Nick Chubb's probably the best running back in football if we're being totally objective, but we take him as the running back 10, 11, 12 in fantasy because he doesn't get any passing volume and he can't catch the football. Elijah Mitchell wasn't using that role at all last year. A.J. Dillon can catch the football. He showed us this. He's in that tier above in terms of passing work where he will get passing work in a way that a Joe Mixon gets passing work, a way that potentially a Melvin Gordon of yesteryear got passing work, a way that Javonte Williams is getting passing work today. They're going to scheme them a couple touches and they'll get some checkdowns. And they're not featured. They're not a passing running back. But at the same time, they get enough work that combined with their running ability, they can be elite fantasy assets. So it's not necessarily a plus, but it's a qualifier. It's a low bar, but he surpasses it. Since we've seen Dillon demonstrate his capability to catch passes, be schemed passes, be targeted by Rodgers, it inherently raises his upside. The scary part is that he's 6 foot flat and weighs 250 pounds, as much as Derrick Henry, and he ran a 4.53 at the combine, comparable to who? Derrick Henry. Matt LaFleur comes from Tennessee. Derrick Henry. This Packers offense will run heavy, and Dillon will be one of the top 5 guys in the pecking order in terms of getting receptions. The top pass-catching weapon will be one of Aaron Jones or Allen Lazard, maybe Dubs, whatever you want to call him, or Christian Watson cuts in. But Dillon demanded targets and demonstrated hands last year when this offense still had Devontae Adams. Top 12, if not top 6, there is no limit. There's no limit. Just realize the fact that this man is 250 pounds, was a second-round draft pick, ran a 4.5, was an early declare, and he gets targets. Matt LaFleur called him the 1A to Aaron Jones's 1A. What on earth more could you possibly want? This is obvious. If you don't draft this guy, I won't feel bad for you when you don't win your league. This is staring you in the face.
It is.
There's no other way to put it.
Yeah.
This is happening. Whether you like it or not, get on board. He's an RB1. I took him over James Conner today in a best ball draft because
as you should, and I would do that too. And you, again, this is a player that I liked, but I didn't love. His ADP was a lot more fun when it was in the low 7 or the high 70s, but I'm still taking him in the mid 50s now. I mean, every single sign is pointing to him and Aaron Jones both having above a 60% snap share. And
yes,
this offense is going to be, with Aaron Rodgers, is going to be able to support both of them and help both of them flourish. So I'm actually a big fan of both this year.
This is happening. And that's honestly what it came down to, because with Jerry Jeudy, I'm so excited about him. He's my highest roster wide receiver on Underdog. I have him on any dynasty leagues that I'm very, very involved in. I love Jerry Jeudy. But it's not lost to me that Jerry Jeudy could be the wide receiver 20 and still be a success at his current ADP. That's what it comes down to, is like, I think he has top 6 upside, but it's not like Jerry Jeudy could be the wide receiver 14 and he will have had a great year. A.J. Dillon is going to be an RB1. Don't get it twisted.
See, I'm glad you chose him over Jeudy. I really am. Because
at the same time, there's so much evidence for Jeudy.
Yeah.
I know I don't get a 4th guy. I put my money on Pitts, Lance, Dillon. But if I could have extended this into a 4th, like a little 4-team parlay, Jerry Jeudy would be the next man up.
Yeah, it would have been Rashad Bateman to me. Honorable mention to him as well. That's going to do it for this episode. These are the players that Ben and I are not leaving our drafts without this year. We're urging you to do the same. Ben, I think you made some fantastic points on all 3 players. Make sure you guys stay tuned for Guys We Hate, which is the next episode, and we'll be breaking down the players that we really aren't drafting much of this year. Ben, you have any last words before we wrap this up?
I just want to put this out there that if any NFL players are listening and you take something I say personally about Guys We Hate, it's not personal.
It's not personal.
I promise. But
it's strictly
I'm just
fantasy.
a really passionate fantasy football guy. We'll see you guys then there. I'm Ben Weiner.
I'm AJ. Have a good one.